thought this has been a long time coming because I always tend to just quiet myself if around family members who are particularly religious. And that question, so what are you, is something perhaps I've been posed with a lot. Now my summation of myself as a part-time Christian, I'm 32 now, and I say about 22 years of my life I was part-time. And if I'm honest about my relationship to Christianity, I don't think I was ever really in it in the first place. And this is going to link into what I've said. I've never felt the passion, the emotion, the feeling, the things I should feel. It's never been there. And if I'm honest, it's taken me a long time to acknowledge that it isn't a lack of something. It's just I've just never connected. I mean, for the first part of my life, we went to church. So I grew up with my mother. They were divorced, my parents. So I grew up with my mother, and my dad was a presence in my life. And if looking back, we sat in church on a weekly basis, Roman Catholic Christians. I remember sitting there at the back, even learning how to slip out of church towards the end of about 15 minutes into the service, and come back at the end, make sure I grabbed the newsletter and had asked my friend what happened. Did nothing happen? And I became really good at that, faking essentially, making sure it seemed that I was almost playing by the rules. It's taken me a long time to acknowledge, you've never really been in it wholeheartedly. And I think for me, rejection of Christianity isn't so much a rejection of the theological Christianity, the Bible, what Moses did, what anyone did in the Bible, but more so a rejection of identity. My issue with Christianity is about identity, not necessarily Christianity in itself, and it's probably led me in a bit of a full circle journey. And if I'm honest, the first thing, if I look back, what I was actually rejecting was blackness, what it meant to be black. A lot of my friends, family as well, are Christians. Christianness or Christianity comes as part of the package, effectively. I grew up in London, in northwest London. Black people, Christian. Christianity is everywhere. It's in before meals, it's before exams, it's before anything major happens, we need to say a prayer or give thanks. And it was so intertwined with what it meant to be black, and since I felt, I don't quite agree with this, I felt an anger when I was younger, almost a rejection of what it meant to be black, and since Christianity formed part of the package, I went for Christianity quite hard. And I'd always envied people growing up, who even people my own age. I remember being 13 and people going off to prayer camps, which, if I look back, if I'm honest, my mother would never have sent me anywhere near. She maintained a participation in Christianity, but a healthy distance. I remember the prayer camps, I remember the prayer seminars, I remember the pastors, ceremonies where, and this is diverging from Christianity now, I look back, but again, blessing food and having it auctioned off in church. I just remember seeing all this stuff going on around me when young, and feeling like, yeah, I'm here, but I'm not really part of this. This isn't something I necessarily agree with, doesn't connect with me. I don't feel the urge to speak in tongues or anything, or the form of Christianity which I was predominantly exposed to. And it was that which, I guess, started me on my journey, and it took a long time to really acknowledge. Now, it's with this sort of rejection of what it meant to be black, I felt, you don't quite fit into this, why am I part of this? It was almost perhaps hypocrisy as well, and hypocrisy which I saw from, I remember often family, and even to this day perhaps at certain times, using Christianity as a crutch to beat other people with. And those people often, more often than not, were people who chose to live lives outside Christianity, gay people, even my own siblings who chose other lives or other paths. And so I remember leaving perhaps my early teenage years with a feeling of, well, I don't know about this thing which I'm involved with. I've not really questioned it. Just nod your head, keep silent, and get on with it, and you'll eventually you'll be fine. And as I left my real teenage years, still, going to church once in a while, family still being involved, that perhaps transformed into a hardened atheism, which is, if I think about it, is actually the natural response. Christianity to me was about identity of a certain blackness, or what blackness represented to me, developed into an atheism and a real intolerance, perhaps during my 20s, to anyone and everything religious. Now, I think that's a very natural path, but that did cause particular problems with family, also romantic partners. I remember I went out with a girl who was involved in, they call it I can't remember what a white cloth church. I think it's West African, predominantly West African, or I perceive it to be West African, where, it was speaking in tongues, it was full on. And I could never, ever reconcile herself, her personality, with this thing which she was committed to regularly. The contradiction for me, the jump was simply just too far. And it caused significant problems, I remember this. And even at university, I remember debating with people at Afro-Caribbean Society and actually refusing to go because every session we'd talk about the Word of God. And I remember asking, like, why are we talking about God or Jesus Christ? And it was like everywhere I looked, this identity thing kept on coming back. Now that rejection of Christianity, it still wasn't complete. I felt that, I wouldn't say I needed to destroy Christianity, because that's too harsh, but it needed to be removed from day-to-day reference. The connection, I felt there was an over-connection between what it meant to be black British in the United Kingdom and being a Christian, and I felt during my 20s at least, that had to be removed at all costs. You know, there was a deep rejection, and ironically, more I rejected it, the more battles I got into. And becoming more clear on that as well invited more challenge, especially from family. Now, if I think about my early years and, you know, perhaps part-time Christianity, or I label it part-time Christianity, the passive consumption of Christian beliefs, teachings, values through associations, family, then a transition to almost a hardened atheism around the time I went to university, and probably for that decade in my 20s. Does I feel, you know, having turned 30 a few years ago, perhaps coming on a more of a full circle journey. And that journey has been informed perhaps by experience. You know, the hypocrisy I pointed out, especially towards Christianity when young, I've now begun to realize that that hypocrisy is in fact everywhere, and it's in everyone. And that's perhaps increased with the death of parents, and increased responsibility for my family and extended family. And it's really come through experiences with my sister, who's a Pentecostal Christian, very committed Pentecostal Christian. And I was speaking to her about one of my nephews who's in a church group. And again, I was sitting there half listening to what she was saying about the church. And she talked about his involvement in a church group. And she lives on a part of London which knife crime is a real issue. And there was a moment in a conversation, this was a couple of years ago, where she said, you know, it keeps him off the streets. And part of me had to swallow that. As much as I disagreed with some of the teachings, part of me was like, okay, I guess I can see the point. And I think my journey, especially with regard to Christianity, has been twofold. Recognizing, firstly, I'm not a Christian. Sorry, just even saying that. And I never have been, if I'm honest. I do recognize the teachings of Christianity have had a big influence on my life. And there was a point where I rejected the teachings. But almost sitting with that and being okay with it. But I think more crucially is also recognizing the contradictions within Christianity and the wider world. But also learning to sit at peace with family who aren't going anywhere, and I can't get away from, and love dearly, but also sitting comfortably with their religious beliefs and my own humanism. And it was great when I came to humanism. Humanism for me was articulation of things I'd been feeling for years, ever since I stood in the church, half asleep, leaning against the wall, and before I learned to almost exit those services. It was like an articulation of everything I felt, and everything which I felt, which often has been fired back at as, well, you've got to pick sides. You know, pick sides. What are you? And the confused look after saying, well, I sort of believe in here and now, and if you be a good person, I think we'll be okay. But I think that journey has led me to where I am right now, which is, I said, you know, accepting, you know, what I'm not, but I think most importantly, not seeing Christianity as something to be removed or destroyed personally, but learning to sit comfortably. That means going to my sister's house perhaps when I'm in London, as she talks to me about activities the church have got going on, or my nephew's involvement with the church, and being okay with that. And being okay, that's great, that works for you, and that's perfect. One of my close friends had a recent conversion to Islam, and him and a few other people, they provided dawah to me recently, which was giving me the teachings of Islam. And it felt empowering to say, you know what, no thank you, but you know, it sounds interesting, and then to move on. And I think that's taken me more than 20 years to come to that point, to be comfortable within myself, but also not to see life as a series of contradictions, which Christianity played a big part in that, but to sit with it, perhaps to recognize who I am and not seek to change or convert or save, nor to be saved in myself. Because as much as I perhaps feel a little more liberated now, I do recognize Christianity has contributed, and the Christian values have contributed to a lot of self-judgment and unhappiness in my life about who I am, standards I've met, or standards I'm not meeting. And it's taken a lot of time to perhaps dig at this. You know, where do you take your beliefs from? Why do you believe that? What's this perfect image you have of yourself? And as much as I sat there as a young person in church, I absorbed a lot of that and internalized a lot of those beliefs. And I think where I am right now is, coming to humanism is really a point at which I can say perhaps with some certainty, I know what I am not, but more importantly, I'm no longer obsessed with perhaps the contradictions of life, which if you dig into it, is in fact everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you. You touched on my life there when you were thinking of, when we're talking about identity in the black community and religion being an enormous part of it. And I remember not being able to put a morsel in my mouth without saying something, at least say God bless you. There was nothing that could enter my mouth without. And the days of going to your whole week is taken up with Bible study and going to someone's house and the whole thing. And the religion you were talking about is Pocomania.
Oh, that's okay.
Again, taken over through slavery and this idea of African spiritualism mixed in with Christianity, creating something else. So, and that's also related to identity. When you're thinking of the black experience in Christianity, identity then becomes part of it. If you think of the slave trade and how Christianity was introduced, and obviously the whole identity of a black person and all the islands and Africa, religion is a huge part. And being part of London Black Atheists is why it was started. It was because of this identity that black people have, particularly that relates to religion and being part of it and not wanting to be part of it, but having family. All my family are religious. I'm the only atheist in my family, and having that whole experience. So thank you for telling my story without me having to tell my story.